without further ado, Dr. Fahmida, please, would you like to share any slides?
No, no, I don't have any slides. I'll just talk.
No problem.
Yes. Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank the Future Earth South Asia Regional Center. I'm really privileged and honored to be part of this session. I'm sorry that I could not join in the morning due to an urgent work, which just came very late. So this whole theme of this conference or webinar on the Sustainable Development Goals in South Asia, I find, and I would also thank for selecting such an issue, which is very crucial, particularly during the time we are passing through. So the topic which I'm given to talk about is macroeconomic policy in South Asia, integrating social and environmental protection. I will just focus on a few aspects during my 15 minutes of intervention. Of course, this is a very vast issue because when you talk about macroeconomic policy, the landscape is quite vast. So just to begin with, to give a context that how South Asia has been doing in terms of economic and social and also environmental aspects during the pre-COVID period. Of course, COVID has changed everything because it has not only shattered the economic progresses which the world has made, but it also has reversed some of the important achievements that we had made during during several decades, actually. So on economic area, on social area, and also on environmental areas. For example, the issue which we are dealing with today, that is the Sustainable Development Goals in case of SDGs, and prior to that, Millennium Development Goals, the countries have made so much progress, and particularly I can talk about Bangladesh's achievement also. My fellow speakers are there and they can also contribute to that, Bangladesh has been a stellar performer in case of MDG achievement and also in case of SDGs achievements. Not only in case of higher economic growth, which has led to reduction of poverty, and also led to achievement of many social indicators in case of women's empowerment, then reduction of maternal and child mortality. So all these have been very visible in our development traits. But unfortunately, because of this wrath of the COVID-19, many of these achievements are now being challenged. So South Asia is no exception. So having said that, if we also look back or reflect on some of the patterns of South Asian economic growth, because we are dealing with macroeconomic policy in this session, in my talk particularly. So of course, South Asia has been one of the better performers when you look at other regions of the world. It not only made a reasonable rate of growth, but also could maintain some amount of macroeconomic stability. So through growth, in case of other macro indicators, for example, inflation or investment to some extent. So, and also the trade balances on all these, some amount of macro stability had been observed, and which had given the strength of these economies. But if you also look at the other side of the coin, that what kind of growth had been achieved in the region, I think this is a general discussion I'm making because it's, of course, every country is different. Even within South Asia, we have homogeneity in many areas, but also we have to remember there are also differences in these areas. Within South Asia, there are countries which are developing country, which are least developed country, which are landlocked countries. So we can't really also make general statement, but overall, if we just if we put a snapshot of the summary of economic development and its inherent features, I would say that despite some sort of reasonable growth, there are weaknesses in case of inequality. Of course, you can say that inequality is a global phenomena, and the whole world, if you look at the nature of global economic growth, inequality is a challenge. Every year we find reports by many organizations which shows that how the resource distribution is skewed, and it is widening, unfortunately, and South Asia is no different. And also we have also seen that there has been structural transformation, of course, from agriculture to manufacturing to services, and for higher employment generation, services sectors and manufacturing, these are the sectors which can contribute much more. But we have also seen probably South Asia has been going through a sort of um, uh, early stagnation of the manufacturing sector. That is, before it reached its peak, it could not, it didn't, it just stagnated at some point, in the sense that it is not able to create enough jobs. If you look at other developed countries or the development pattern, the contribution of the manufacturing sector at one point in time in terms of contributing to generating employment, that is not so much in case of South Asia, even including countries like Bangladesh and India. Also, there have been a lot of studies. In fact, we have also done a study, and a book has been published recently. I mean, not recently, 2 years back, I remember. So where the industrialization pattern has been observed within the South Asia. And one important findings of that study has been that the manufacturing sector is not performing as it has to perform. The other area of weakness is that the investment, the expedition of investment, both public and private investment, particularly for private investment, is so important for generation of employment. And also the other aspect is the issue of environmental and climate change related challenges. Of course, these are some of these challenges which are related to climate change. Those are external challenges, and countries, Bangladesh and also all the South Asian countries, do not, in many areas, do not have much to do with that. Of course, India being a large economy and investment being made in power generation at a higher rate, it also has some contribution towards climate change. But for other countries, the contribution of, for example, carbon emission is so low. So compared to other regions, so this region's contribution is lower. But even then, these countries are vulnerable to the impact, and there has been a need for following a green economic growth. The other, the last point of the growth pattern, I would say that's overarching, and that is the issue of governance. So it's a cross-cutting issue, be it for macroeconomic policy or climate-related policy or sectoral policy. So there are weaknesses in governance which are being observed in these countries. In the countries within the South Asian region. Now, in view of these contexts, this context of both economic achievements and also the weaknesses, now, as we are passing through the time of pandemic, we are talking about building back better or building forward better. Now, if we are we have to, if we have to think of building forward better, so some of these weaknesses that I have mentioned, those have to be changed, those have to be removed and reversed, in fact. So since my issues here is related to social and environmental protection. So I would just go directly to these aspects, which has strong linkages with macroeconomic policies, because when you talk about macroeconomic policies, then one for both social and environmental protect, one issue is related to these two areas is fiscal policy, because when we talk about social protection or social progress, we have seen that the South Asian countries, those countries have made um, important achievements, but there are a lot to do, because this is also a region where a huge number of poor people live. So in order to do that, in order to reduce poverty, in order to bring them, many of those people uh, under the labor market, and also create opportunities. So the government has to come forward, government has to provide various sort of supports through fiscal policies. And for social protection, when you talk about social protection for the people who are marginalized, who are poor, who are youth, but who are young, but they don't have access to the labor market, or women. So the main objective of the macroeconomic policy should be employment generation. Of course, as I have mentioned, that private sector is the major source of employment generation, but the government has a role to play when there are some limitations. For example, when you talk about social safety net, expansion of social safety net, universal health care, universal education, universal social safety net. So these are the responsibility of the government, and I think the government can address these issues through macroeconomic policies. The other areas related to fiscal policy is, of course, expenditure or public investment. Public expenditure is one aspect, but in order to make higher public investment or public expenditure for social outcome, better social outcome, the government has to have fiscal space. So emphasis on higher domestic resource mobilization is so important, and so that fiscal space is created for making more investment. But we have also seen that in many of the South Asian countries and many countries across the world, also particularly in the low-income countries, least developed countries, domestic resource mobilization has been a challenge. In case of Bangladesh, it has also been a challenge because it's one of the lowest in the world. So it is below 10% of GDP. So in fact, in other South Asian countries also, it has to be expedited so that the government has more space, more leverage to make investment on the social empowerment, social protection. I would also, with regard to the environmental protection, I would also bring the issue of fiscal policy and fiscal space. In case of environmental protection, when you talk about the fiscal policies, taxation, subsidies, incentive, these policies have direct environmental implications. These have direct implications for sustainable resource management and, in the end, sustainable development. For example, taxes on some of the sectors, particularly the extractive natural resources, for example, natural gas, fisheries, forestries. So if these are not taxed or priced properly, then there is a tendency for overuse. So that's why the pricing is important. In environmental economics, usually the price of a resource or a product is calculated in a manner that includes private cost of production plus the cost of externality, because each and every product we produce that has a cost that creates, maybe it can increase our welfare, material welfare, but also it creates some sort of negative externality. For example, when you construct a factory, for example, by cutting forest, of course, it creates employment, it creates income for the poor people, but it also, reduces forest and the intrinsic value of a natural resource, that is forestry, that is lost. And unless we replace it at a rate which is much more higher, that is not happening in South Asia. Overall, in many countries, the deforestation rate is very, very high. In case of Bangladesh, per capita, forest cover fell by an annual rate of 1.8% during 1990 and 2015, which is quite high. There have been, of course, efforts, but it's still not adequate. Similar is the issue of natural gas, for example. I mean, once upon a time, we had a lot of we had a comfortable level of natural gas, but that it is, firstly, it is an exhaustible resource unless there is the new invention, new find. So that's why it's depleting, and also not only depleting, the higher, if it is cheaper, then there is this tendency of using it more in an inefficient way, and it also leads to higher carbon emission because then we tend to use more fuel oil for our own production or running vehicles and all. Same goes for fisheries, so if it is not priced properly, or the fishing rights or property rights are not fixed, then property rights is not also managed in a way that some of the rights of which would be of the government's responsibility. Government has to monitor and supervise, and it should not be many of the fishing areas where private rights are implemented, but in not only in case of private rights, but also when it is open property rights, there is also a tendency of overfishing. So this is again this is again a resource which depletes, which has to be regenerated. And not only that, it also creates excessive fishing that also contributes to pollution, water pollution, for example. So this is a whole huge change. So pricing plays a very important role in case of natural resources and environmental resources. So now,
Fahmida, just
I will wrap up. Yes, I'll just wrap up. There are many examples of this, but what I would, in the end, is say that the objective of macro policy are twofold. It should be twofold, in the new perspective of the whole development paradigm. The first one is to achieve economic stabilization, and the second one is related to this social and environmental objective. It should be coupled with distributional equity and also inclusive growth, which includes universal education, social protection, healthcare, and all. So that's why some of these goals, some of the macro economic goals sometimes are short run or medium run, but we have to actually focus on the long-term implications of the growth, because the traditional growth concept does not cover the long-term welfare concept. And this welfare is achievable only if we can focus on social progress and environmental related progress. So the government has a very important role, and we have seen that during the COVID also, how the state had to come forward, and in the end it is the government which has to make a choice between the short-term objectives versus the and long-term objectives. So we should not get diluted between the short-term goals versus the long-term goals while we talk about social and environmental issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Fahmida, so much for your insights on that, on macroeconomic policies and relations with social protection and environmental protection in the South Asian region. Smriti, you have something to...
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Anupama. We couldn't discuss this in the beginning because we still had participants coming, and I would like to again welcome all the speakers who were also there at the panel. And also I would like to welcome the new speakers who were not there at the panel, especially all the speakers who are lined after the 3 o'clock session as well. So I just want to bring your attention to this first webinar series where all the delegates have helped us launch this event and also this whole session. So what we plan to do now is we have this first webinar series where you all are the stakeholders, and we thank everybody for agreeing to serve on the working committee where we plan to bring out a call for action at the end of 2022. And we will be proceeding with a series of webinars and workshops, all culminating in a regional summit. Hopefully, if things are fine, we plan a 1-week workshop in December in the Indian Institute of Science in the Diveja Center for Climate Change. That's where our Future Earth South Asia hub is located. I wouldn't want to break from our talks, so I'll go back to Anupama. Anupama, please take over.
Yes, thank you so much, Smriti. Yes, so since we might have a little bit of delay between the talks of say a few minutes, we can just always catch that up during the short break that's coming up after the 4th talk of the day. But quickly, and the question answers, any questions coming for the first 4 talks will be taken on right at the end of the 4th talk as well. Please enter any questions you have, even the speakers for each other, in the Q&A box, and we will take them up from there. All right, so I will be calling the second speaker for our session today, Mr. Khurshid. If you could please take the floor, please. Yes. Would you like to share any slides, sir?
No, I don't. I don't. Thank you, Anupama, and good afternoon, friends and colleagues, and also fellow panelists. I'll build on what Dr. Fahmida Khatun mentioned about hope. Fahmida, great to see you after a long time. You may not know that I have moved to Bhutan 4 months back and living here. It's snowing this morning.
Good to see you. Yes.
Yeah, good to see you after a long time. So I will build on your hope and then highlight the major fault lines which are driven by climate change, and then raise few questions because there is no straightforward answer. I think raising question would be much more useful for the students who are participating in this webinar. So as I said, I moved to Bhutan for 4 months back, and I'm 4 months old in Bhutan. But one thing that I realized after coming to Bhutan, which is approximately 4 kilometers above from my home, which is Dhaka, and more precisely northern part of Bangladesh. The major realization is that I will make a statement to spark thinking that the entire Bengal Delta, what we see today, divided between West Bengal in India and major parties in Bangladesh, is the historically fertile, and that can also explain why Bangladesh and Bengal is prosperous. Bengal continue to prosper. Bengal has highly densely populated, or the history of density of population or in migration from all over India, all over the world. And I would think that it is a gift of Bhutan, and it's a gift of Nepal as well, because the sedimentation process and the clean water. So the reason I mentioned that to highlight two issues. One, when you look at the South Asian geography, the Indian Ocean and the Himalayan ecosystem, without putting the current political map, we would see that we are all interconnected environmentally, ecologically. But the moment we put the map, it's a fragmentation, political fragmentation, because the entire region is divided into many different countries. The reason I mentioned that story to highlight that the problems, particularly the environmental problems, doesn't need any passport. And without a collaborative action, which we are trying to achieve through this webinar, by all countries, making the region resilient would not be possible. But building on the hope that Dr. Fahmida said, is important, that we need to look at that we started with very low base as a region. I was trying to remember a book I read many years back, written by Mike Davis. It's called Late Victorian Holocaust. He mentioned that during the Victorian time, almost 50 million people died globally. And out of that, due to famine, out of that, 7 to 8 million people were from India. That means as a region that Fahmida mentioned, we have a lot to be inspired. And one of them is we have defeated famine. The region has defeated a lot of diseases. I'm going into Professor Harari, the famine plague, so that region in recent years also sparked a lot of new ideas. If I name few of them, if you look at the disaster mortality rate over the last 100 years, there is a drastic reduction in Bangladesh and India, in Nepal, because of increasing investment on disaster management, early warning system, use of technology. In a similar way, in the morning we mentioned about gross national happiness in Bhutan and environmental conservation effort in Bhutan, and they're interconnected. One of the 9 pillars of gross national happiness is the environmental conservation. So Bhutan is making a great investment, created some of the finest professionals and examples of how to protect environment. I think Bhutan has that. Nepal, on the other side, has created remarkable capability to manage mega disaster because they have experienced. And India, on the other side, is technologically much more advanced. So within the region, inside the box, we have created a lot of excellence. The key point that I wanted to make, how that hope and how that inspiration can be transformed to manage this mega problem of climate change that is not going to affect one single country. And if one single country is affected, then it will make a greater impact across the region. That is where, the second point would be, looking at all the technological, all innovation that the countries have made and produced, how we can make sure that they are available for other countries to use. So making it, transforming it from the national ownership to a more of a public goods. That is where I see a greater hope to manage climate change. So we need to combine the collective effort to put together all this, the excellent innovation and ways of doing things. Second point is why we should do that. We should do that is very clear that the resilience is not, we're talking about climate change, is not just a problem within the country. There are three major areas I see through which the region would be affected. One is the extreme weather, cyclone, flooding, and other kind of extreme weather events. 750 million people were affected over the last 10 years, and we're losing $160 billion annually because of the recurrence of disaster. Then water stress is another area, and food system that we also need to be mindful. Can we achieve, or can we defeat climate change, or can we adapt to climate change as through a nationalist, or through as a one nation, and work in isolation? The answer is clearly no. The past effort, I think we need to be mindful that within the SARC framework, there are a lot of investment made in terms of seed bank, food bank, SARC disaster management system. We need to learn lessons, what we have achieved and what must be done to make sure that those systems are working for everyone. In that line, I think what the new dimension that we need to look at, that Fahmida also mentioned, is to just not just focusing on low-hanging fruit, but also start discussing on the difficult areas like transboundary water sharing, and also that has to be supported by the smart agriculture. How can we make sure that we are also investing on the food system that is much more nature positive and use less water, for example. Second point, in a larger scheme, I have 3 points. What signal we see, what's coming up in future? I mentioned in the morning that UNDP has established the global network of accelerator lab to support the SDG implementation. One signal is very clear that there is an increased appetite for green production. And if you look at the Green Deal in European Union, the green has become a new currency. Market access without greening your production system would be very, very difficult. So from there, grow now and clean later, which often influence much of the manufacturing and industrial production in South Asia, needs to be challenged, and is not just an option anymore. It is an imperative that we switch to green production in order to sustain the trade and exchange of goods with the countries, within the countries, as well as the major trade blocks of South Asia region. Then Fahmida also mentioned about governance. That would be my last point. So the current approach of managing risk as a specialized sector is not going to work. That's the point I made in the morning as well, because the development climate change should not be seen in isolation, because they're a system, and managing risk alone would not guarantee that our development will remain resilient. So the point that I want to make is that we need a new generation of governance, that the system risk, that the climate, the way we see the risk today is all systemic, all connected, interconnected. That has to be managed through better or risk-informed development. So we need to make a paradigm shift from management of risk to governing the risk, systemic risk. And that is where the all countries needs to work together to make sure that the governance or our economic model is anticipatory, that can anticipate challenge, that has an adaptability within the system, and it has agility to manage the risk and thrive better. Before I finish, I want to leave with a few questions. I introduced this nexus of COVID, and I think there was a question that how we're going to advance the implementation of SDG when countries do not have money. Because of the COVID, unemployment rate is very, very high, that Fahmida has mentioned. Informality is one of the key features of South Asia, that how that informality can be smarter. I don't know what form that should be, but the informal economy is hardest hit, and where you see lots of jobless. So in that context, the nexus of climate change and COVID, if you put them together, we need to make sure that our economy is not just climate resilient, but also pandemic proof for future. So what would be the legacy of COVID? That's the question I'm always asked, and also I ask other people. If you look at major crises over last 100 years or 200 years, there is a great book written by Gerard Diamond. It's called Upheaval, and he mentioned a lot of the positive change that emerged from the crisis. That is why the question of COVID legacy comes in, and I would like to see, I think, like anyone Fahmida has said, and anyone in the world, that the post-COVID and COVID legacy would be a better social protection system, better managed economy. The digital divide is a big, big challenge in our region, and we need to look at how to narrow the divide and making sure that there is a equitable digital access by everyone. A gender equal society is very, very important. The possibility, and if we are right in our development approach, that can also be achieved. Before I finish, I just wanted to quote from a report which was published in Foreign Affairs by Stuart, who works for the Council of Foreign Relations. He raised a very fundamental question that, can climate change be solved with the current configuration of international order? In a similar way, I also like to put that question at the end, that the current governance structure that we discussed extensively in the morning, which are sectorally fragmented, which are ministerially or institutionally fragmented, academically fragmented. With that social infrastructure that we have, is it fit for purpose? Do we need to invest on new form of infrastructure to defeat climate change? Climate change is a real problem. With IPCC report in 2021, it's absolutely clear that the difference between 1.5 degree and 2 degree is not what we perceive in 2015 when Paris Agreement was signed. Difference is very, very high, and it's not just quantitative or incremental difference. It is a change of the nature of the impact. One example, it said within 1.5 degree, the 70% of the coral reef will be gone. With the 2 degrees Celsius, there would not be no coral reef. Then what kind of governance we need to look for? Institutional model and also regional cooperation within that is the fundamental question for us today to make the region resilient. With that note, I would like to stop now. Thank you so much for listening to me, and over to Anupama, if you allow me, I may need to leave in next 30 minutes, but I will rejoin while we have a wider Q&A. Over to you, Nirupama, and thanks for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Mr. Alam, for your talk. And yes, we will certainly be remaining open so you can join again later. I apologize because I completely forgot one crucial thing that I was supposed to do, which was to introduce both of you speakers before calling you to your talk. So I will quickly just tell the audience a little bit about the two speakers whom we just had before introducing our third speaker for the day. So we just had Dr. Fahmida Khatun, who spoke to us the first day and shared her insights about macroeconomic policy in South Asia. As I mentioned earlier, she's the executive director of the Center for Policy Dialogue in Dhaka, Bangladesh, which is a leading think tank in South Asia. She's an economist by training, and she completed her PhD in economics from the University College of London in the UK. And she's done her postdoctoral research at the Earth Institute at Columbia University in the US. And she's been a visiting fellow at various institutes around the world thereafter. Her areas of interest include macroeconomic policy and management, climate change and environmental economics, financial sector, international aid effectiveness, international trade, and World Trade Organization issues, youth employment, gender issues, interests of LDCs, as well as the SDGs. And that is exactly what we wanted her to discuss and tell us about today. So thank you so much, ma'am, for doing that. And then after her, we just had Mr. Khurshid Alam joining us from the United Nations Development Program in Bhutan. He's the Deputy Resident Representative there. He recently took on this role after working with UNDP Bangladesh, where his portfolio included inclusive growth and resilience. He has been a passionate advocate for an equitable, multiracial, and resilient world. And his work has spanned over 25 years in 50 different countries across Asia, Africa, the Caribbean, and Europe. And he's held various roles before joining the UN as well. So he was the managing director of Thinkahead Limited, a UK-based consulting company. And he was also at ActionAid in various roles, including International Tsunami Program Director and Global Policy Advisor, all based in the UK. Based on his talk, I'm sure you could all tell that he is a frequent keynote speaker. He's authored 3 books and numerous journal articles, and we invited him today to speak a little bit about how prepared we are to deal with crises like the climate crisis, as well as inputs about COVID as well, which he has covered. Thank you so much, sir, for your talk. And I'll quickly introduce our third speaker today, Mr. Sundar Narayan Mishra. He is currently the advisor for government consulting at Ernst & Young, and he also heads the SDG unit at the government of Odisha in India. He's also had a career that spanned over 20 years, and he's managed various development interventions across various sectors, including livelihoods, governance and local government management, elementary and primary education, child rights and protection, women's empowerment, community development, poverty reduction. His development management functions have included project and program management, planning, monitoring, supervision of diverse and multidisciplinary teams, and partnership management with communities, civil society, as well as government institutions. He's worked with the state and national government in India, with NGOs as well as civil society at various levels, and with national and international donor agencies, including different UN agencies. So really a very varied portfolio there, Mr. Sundar Narayan Mishra. Before I hand over the floor to you, I would like to thank all of our speakers for joining us today. And also, we welcome you on to our regional working committee, and we hope to see you in future events as well. Mr. Sundar, please, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Anupama. Thank you for that nice word there. And good afternoon to all colleagues from Future Earth, South Asia, my fellow panelists, and members of the audience. Nice to be back, and it's a very interesting dialogue which is setting up. And am I audible?
Yes, sir, we can hear you. Yes, sir, we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll now, I like slightly switch gear from the regional level to a country level. I'll mostly focus about India. and we'll talk about the community aspects of the SDG interventions. Well, I'll start with looking at where India stands as far as the SDGs are concerned. This is broadly the SDGs framework. Everybody knows about it. So let's look at India's status on SDGs. Sorry. India actually stands not in a very good place. It actually has 120th rank amongst 165 countries in the latest report, the Global SDG report, and with a score of 60.1, which is 60.07 to be very precise. And as you see, there are only two goals on which the country is on track, that is 6 and 13, and there are 6 goals on which there are slight improvement happening: 1, 3, 7, 8, 9, and 14. And there are 5 very important goals. There is stagnation being reported, 2, 5, 11, 16, and 17, and 2 important goals where the country's the progress is going down. This is 4 and 15. I mean, a lot of concerns there. If you look at the national index, it's slightly different. It actually measures progress on little higher number of indicators, 115 to be precise in the latest report. And I mean, there are several areas on which it concurs with the global diagnostic. For instance, in the SDG 2 and SDG 5 and several other areas where we are actually, you see the yellow sticks. The diagnosis is more or less similar. Just to tell you, this is you see these things below. You have these categories. Anybody actually, any particular score under 50, 0 to 49 is basically grouped as aspirant, and then 50 to 64 is performer, and then front runner is 65 to 99. The scores are basically, like most of you be already knowing, this is basically on a continuum from 0 to 100. These are normalized scores according to this methodology, which is, broadly in sync with the global methodology adopted by the STSN report. So as you see, there are, a lot of concern areas marked by these yellow and red sticks. But, as different from the global report, there are certain, there are several goals on which recent progress has also been reported. Like if you see goal 3, goal 6, 7, 10, 11, and 12, more importantly. These are under certain indicators, on which data available. So there is a kind of a sense of momentum. So be that as it may, I mean, a lot of things actually need to really move on because a lot of problems are there. Like I was saying in the morning, a lot depends on the indicators you choose and the sectors you currently look at. And while you look at the SDG index and the findings that come out from this, we need to look at the SDGs with a broader frame of reference to the targets and the goals, and then see wherever data are not available, we do not actually fall back in terms of interventions. Now coming back to the point of my focus is basically, let's look at the communities. Communities are basically the sites where sustainable development goals are going to be achieved. Other systems are basically facilitators, enablers for that to happen. And the communities can be located at any level because they are geographically all over the place. And, they actually include various segments of people in different demographic and socioeconomic space. So it's important to look at them and work with them so that achievement of SDGs is basically taken forward. If we look at some of the major areas, I just try to highlight where you can engage with the community. The first thing to start is basically to understand sustainable development the nuances and the aspects of sustainability, how it is actually relating to one's own lifestyle, modes of consumption. A lot of the contribution comes from individuals' way of living. So a lot of people actually externalize development and they do not consider their own action as part of the sustainability process. So it's very important to look at that. So there, sensitization, awareness development is very important to, build in this kind of sensitivity. And then, a lot of work happens at the community level. It has been happening for a long time. And there is a need to look at contextualize that work in the, in the SDGs, and then see where we are actually going. What are the trade-offs? If we are doing poverty alleviation, what are the environmental downsides? If we are doing actually a lot of environment-oriented work, then where are the issues of equities? Who are the people who are actually benefiting from this? Are we actually advancing certain objectives of certain stakeholders, and then actually what do you call, maybe not looking at others? So those are the important areas to look at. And then look at the exclusion risks, because particularly in our region, social exclusion is writ large. All kinds of deprivations and exclusions are there, because our societies are basically split diversely, across different areas of deprivation. So you need to look at, where those things are happening and who are the people who are basically, are at the risk of being left behind. And that happens in every interventions. People willingly leave a lot of people behind. So we need to look at those aspects in our community-oriented interventions. And of course, the major interveners, the government and allied agencies, they also need to be accountable. This accountability is a multimodal process where all different stakeholders need to play a role. Not only communities, but communities play a very important role, can play a very important role at this point of time. In many cases, communities are muted. They do not actually play a very assertive role in terms of holding the governments and their different agencies accountable. So that is something which need to looked into. And then, of course, data and information is something which is very critical for SDGs. We have talked about in the morning. So how we can actually build up that, and without that, communities will be absolutely what do you call hamstrung to actually move forward. And then partnership is very important as far as SDGs are concerned, because of its multidimensional aspects. So we have a lot of different stakeholders. We used to live outside our interventions before, but we need to really connect now, because without the involvement of these people, without breaching the silos, we cannot really make progress on many of the SDGs. So these are certain broad areas we need to focus when we are actually looking at community engagements. And I'll go forward to look at some examples of community engagement in our country, and then look at various aspects of them. Let's look at one such example. This is actually initiated. This was initiated in the context of India. And so this was what happened is, we selected 14 different, you see all those and the golden blocks at the on the left hand side, the 14 different categories of social groups, and we worked with them to look at the concept of sustainability from their angles, and then look at help them to look at the policies, laws, and rules from the perspective of their own rights and entitlements. And then their access to justice and access to institutions in terms of gathering support for their work, for their issues. And then look at the government program implementation, how it is actually responding to their rights and entitlements as far as the SDGs targets and goals and targets are concerned. And then, of course, the resource issues, like whether they have the rightful access to resources, financial, natural, and other resources, knowledge resources, which is being brought up. So those aspects. And of course, all those things actually in the context of data. I mean, does the government have data about themselves? Do they themselves have data about their own situation? So looking at all those aspects, actually, these 14 different groups. So we had processes which started from right at the ground level and went up to the national level through a series of consultations, and that led to a kind of diagnosis which became part of our VNR report, India's Voluntary National Review report, and that was India's status on leaving no one behind. So apart from the report, it actually started a process of conscientization, process of reflection, and also ground level action, which continued, even continues after that. It involved a lot of stakeholders from civil societies and NGOs, but also a lot of community-based organizations, field activists, and grassroots level leaders. And that was a very insightful process, and I mean very prizing process. I personally was got a lot of information, a lot of what do you call learnings from that process. So that that was the kind of thing which community engagement should continue as far as SDGs interventions are concerned. Apart from that, in the region, you may be knowing about the rural local self-governance structure of India, which is also similar to other parts of South Asia, the panchayats. And from 2015 onwards, we have this process of local planning at the panchayat level. The period broadly coincides with the SDGs coming into force. And that was a kind of process which started from the national level. Fiscal decentralization happened. And then the Gram Panchayat level, the village council level planning process was actually kicked off across the country. And it took some time to gain momentum. At this point of time, this is quite widespread across the country. And if you look at, the current status, for this year, you see there are about 200,000, close to 300,000 GPs involved, and there are works about uh, close to more than 7 million works which have been actually planned in course of these exercises, and it has involved massive capacity development of community planners, facilitators, and the local what do you call liaison persons with the government programs. So that has been going around the country. And if you look at the aspects of the process, there is a participation by vulnerable groups. All different groups actually bring in their own inputs and perspectives into the planning. And then there is linkage with government schemes. There is technical support provided by the civil society organizations and other technical people. And there is tremendous capacity building happening at all levels, people involved from community to the panchayat tiers, and also other people from the government side. And this is supported by the governance framework of the panchayat, and the resource support from the fiscal decentralization process. So this is a broad and very widespread community level action, yet having a kind of governance sanction from the constitution itself. So that is a very interesting framework where SDGs have also been integrated for the last 2-3 years. I will not say that they have been totally integrated, but they have been actually SDG indicators brought in the planning process, and there have been also SDG kind of broad SDG orientation has been built into the planning framework, and it's work in progress, and it will continue. But it's very interesting in terms of actually building in SDG orientation from the ground level upwards. So going forward, I'll talk about the whole issue of one side. We have very technically dense data analytics which are happening. We have a lot of software which are very sophisticated, and a lot of sophisticated metrics can be worked out. So that's happening, and there are a lot of new innovations are happening, and that's mind-boggling. A lot of new things are happening there. But on the other side, we need to take this revolution to the communities, and for that, what we need simple data forms where people can actually build in their information. We need need to have simple dashboards where people can actually make meaning out of, or we can also make links to other dashboards which are at the state government level, at the central government level. At this point in India, as I also say, I was sharing in the previous, in the forenoon session, this measurement of SDG progress is happening big time from the national to state level and also to the district level, into the district level at this point of time. So there is an opportunity actually to link the communities with this process. So we need intermediation, in a technological intermediation through these instruments like simple data forms, simple dashboards, and then readable charts, and then a simple software solution which can actually help people connect with all those metrics and data which is being available. So then people can consume, people can actually use data as a very important instrumentality for their purposes. So then what happens is people can become part of this uh, uh, community data hub. They can build in community data hub. They can ask questions from their points of view and hold and then bring out reports and uh, start a process of interrogation with the government implementation. So this is something which is there is very good opportunity for that. It's happening in some cases, but a lot needs to be done. And so this is where technical people, civil society organization, and government should actually work hand in hand with the communities to take things forward. It's already happening. For instance, the state government I am located with, there is already plans to build in program monitoring interventions where communities, panchayats, and government departments can work together and create actually processes of data so that reports can be built in from the ground level onwards, and then um, you know um, modifications and changes in the program structures can happen based on people's inputs and things like that. So this is another area where we can actually what you call install a big motor for change, which is basically taking data to the people. So so that's a major aspect I'd like to focus and probably also talk about it, continue to talk about it in ways, different forums going forward. Looking at all those things, these are very positive orientations coming from this, a lot of new directions which are emerging from this, but there are also a lot of challenges we need to address. So for instance, there is, as I said in the beginning, our awareness and sensitivity to SDGs is quite limited, I would say, at this point of time. For instance, how many of us think about driving a car for about 50 kilometers? Do we think about the carbon we are contributing to the atmosphere? Before actually eating our lunch or taking our groceries, are we actually thinking what is the material footprint I am building up? So these are the areas, those kind of questioning we need to build into our own consciousness. So that's the awareness and sensitivity I'm talking about. And we need demonstrable pathways for change. For instance, not only having a kind of external orientation, like we do something so that the sustainable development interventions can happen in the community, but we need to do something so that we can change our lives fundamentally, so that sustainable development happens within myself, within my family, within my community space. So those are the areas. And then we need to have access to communities of practice. Practitioners individually cannot go very far, so we need to build communities out of that. And we need big champions and facilitators. Big numbers of them. They can work small time, but they can actually have a cumulative impact. We need champions to do that work. And of course, we need wider data literacy. We need, data-driven communication ecosystems, like I was talking about at local level, at district level, where people have actually space to talk about. People can actually speak in terms of data, and even illiterate people can do that. So that's the kind of enabling we have to get in. So that's the challenge. And of course, we need to focus on people who are being left behind, who have been historically left behind, and who are getting left behind right in front of, right under our nose. So those analytics we need to build into our work and into our interventions. So then only we'll be able to really work for the successful and fruitful community engagement on SDGs. So this is where probably I'll stop and welcome questions from everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sundar. We'll take questions for your talk right after the fourth talk, which is Mr. Prajal, Dr. Prajal, sorry. So any questions that have come for the previous three speakers will be taken this session. And I believe Mr. Khurshid had to step out for another meeting. So whenever he'll be joining, we'll be directing his questions during the second Q&A session. So whatever questions you have for Mr. Sundar, thank you so much for your talk. Please just direct them in the Q&A box. Mr. Sundar, you have the option of typing the answers directly there, or else we can take them live during the Q&A session. So without any further delay, please allow me to introduce our next speaker, who is Dr. Prajal Pradhan, who is joining us all the way here from Germany. He's a citizen of Nepal otherwise, so his perspective will be from Nepal. Right now, he is a senior scientist at the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research. He has studied agricultural engineering and environmental management and was a lead author of the IPCC Special Report on Climate Change and Land, as well as a contributing author for the Assessment Report 6 of IPCC Working Group 2 and 3 reports. Dr. Prajal has experience in developing relevant research on climate change and sustainable food systems. He's an expert in food system emissions, food security, climate change, as well as the SDGs. Currently, he is a PI of the Bioclimapaths project. His research focuses on understanding urban transformations, investigating impacts of climate change and bioeconomy, as well as identifying interlinkages between bioeconomy and the SDGs. Dr. Prajal, thank you so much for joining us all the way here from Germany. I hand over the floor to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Anupama, and thank you. Hello, everybody. Yeah, thank you for joining us from the morning today. So in this talk today, what I will be presenting with you would be like a study we did in 2020 regarding impact of COVID-19 on sustainable development goals in the context of Nepal. Even though this study is done in Nepal, I guess some of those findings also make sense in the context of other South Asian countries, and also the methodological approach that I will be presenting here could also be replicated here. In his intervention, Mr. Mishra, Sundar Narayan Mishra has emphasized the role of data in terms of SDGs, but we will not always be lucky that we have data for every cases. And here I would be going forward like what we can do when we don't have much data in terms of SDGs, or how we can go for that. But before that, a bit of recap. In 2015, United Nations has adopted Sustainable Development Goals consisting of 17 goals under 69 targets. It has an indicator framework. The global indicator framework consists of around 240 indicators. However, the Sustainable Development Goal itself is not a new concept. We are talking about sustainable development since last 1980s. And what we think about sustainable development is like we need to do our economic activities for societal well-being or to build societal foundation to fulfill our basic needs. And all these things need to be done within our environmental limit or within the planetary boundary. But even though there is this concept like this 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, what we have done is we are pumping a lot of effort or prioritizing our effort to build our economy, to bloom our economy, and what is happening is like this unbalanced focus on economy is creating pressure to our environment, and also is not generating the societal well-being. So that's why we discussed already in the morning and also mentioned during several interventions today that is a GDP or economic growth a nice measure for sustainability has been questioned. Yeah, and in that context, as mentioned previously, Bhutan has come up with gross national happiness. So this is more like a context of what is going on. And now the question is like whether sustainable development goal with this balance between environmental, societal, and economic direction has managed to achieve this balance or not. And what we see here in context of Nepal is that if you look at this trend of progress made in different SDGs for last in 2020, what we can see is like there are many goals. Even though there is a progress, we can clearly see that it's a moderately improving. That means that if this trend continues, what happens is like Nepal will not fulfill its sustainable development goals. There are few goals like 6, 8, 17, 13, which where the business as usual or continuation of what is done today makes sense. But there are also other goals where things are stagnating, like in terms of clean energy or in terms of peace, in terms of sustainable cities and community. And this is the status of a report based on the report in 2020. That means this is what happened till 2019. And as we all know, what happened afterwards is like in 2020, starting of 2020, world is heated by pandemic. So there was an increasing case of COVID all across the world, and different government has used different measures to control the pandemic or to manage the pandemic. And I haven't updated this picture because the picture are changing always. So this is the status for I think somewhere in last year, July last year. But yeah, if you look at this year, there is again a peak coming up here because the COVID case is increasing. And as a result, what we see is like in the report of SDG status in 2021, we already see that there are other goals where things are getting negative. So there is already the impact of pandemic is already visible in COVID-19. And we thought about this in 2020, and then we started a study. And in this study, what we want to know is like, what is the impact of COVID-19 on SDGs? And for this, like mainly we come up with this 3 objectives. The first is to understand potential impact of COVID-19 on SDGs in Nepal. And we want to understand that in terms of short term, that means 1 to 3 years, yeah, mid-term, that is up to 5 years, and the long term, that means by 2030. And then we also try to identify not only the impact, but what are the challenges and also opportunity provide the COVID-19 in terms of achieving SDGs. And at the meantime, this is more like a knowledge co-creation process. So we would also like to develop a network of Nepalese experts within Nepal, but also abroad to support Nepal in terms of recovery or post-COVID recovery. And this was this 3 more goals. And what we did is like, as Mr. Mishra mentioned in the beginning, there is a limitation of data, and in terms of COVID impact, this also quite clear because we are starting phase of the pandemic. And what we did is to tackle this limitation, we went for this knowledge co-creation process, mainly talking with sectoral approach. And here, what we did is like we used this 5-step approach. We started with like a selection of experts across different SDGs. We formed like a 3 to 5 person group of experts for each SDGs. And then what we did is like this group of experts identify other experts in that SDGs, like for SDG 1, we look for like 20-30 other experts. And based on this, this identification of the expert, we did online survey to understand what they do, what is their perception about the impact and why they think about that. And as we know, when we talk with many people, they come up with many perceptions. They may think differently. And that's why we also did online workshop, 1 workshop per each SDGs, yeah, and then try to bring their views together there. And then based on this workshop, we synthesize a report, and then we send this report back to the expert for their opinion or for their review. and then afterwards we synthesize this. So this is more like a process we applied for knowledge co-creation here. And in total, we conducted 20 workshops, which include around 300 participants across different sectors. Why 20 workshops? Because there are a few SDGs like SDG 17, which has a lot of goals, but there are also other SDGs like SDG 4, which is about education, which has multiple dimensions. The thing we need to treat it with university and higher education might be different with in terms of like school or primary education. That's why we had this more than we have 20 workshops, even though there are 17 SDGs. As I mentioned before, in our survey and also workshop, we have participants across a different sector, from policy, including member of parliaments, including a member of national planning commissions, but also politician, also government secretaries, NGOs, INGOs, academic research, business person, freelancers, and so on. So we try to represent different people from different sector of society to understand what they feel the impact of COVID-19 on SDGs. And our framework is since this is a qualitative analysis, we ask them to give a score from +3 to -3. What they think would be the impact, whether the impact is promoting to obtain that SDGs, or the impact would be restricting to achieve that SDGs. And not only the score, we also ask the reason behind those scores. Why certain experts think that COVID-19 will have deteriorating effect or restricting effect for SDG 1.1, which is related to end poverty. And then what we did is, like, after this process, we accumulate all this result and presented this result in this form, where here we can see all the SDGs, 7 SDGs. These are the 3 time frame: short, medium, and long time frame. And here, these are more like a synthesis of the findings in terms of target. And we can see here, red the color is, or reddish the color is, the COVID-19 has mostly the negative impact on that SDGs. So we can see here in the short term, most of the expert or finds that there is restricting impact on most of this SDGs. However, they also feel that across time, this negative impact will vanish, and it may also give a positive impact in the long run. But also in short run, we can see some positive impact here. So for example, what happened is, like, during the lockdowns, there was no vehicle movement, so air pollution was reduced, and for a very long period of time, people can see the Himalayan range from Kathmandu. Yeah, so those who have been to Kathmandu, if there is a clean air, good visibility, one can see the Himalayan range. Normally, that's not the case due to air pollution, but during the lockdown, one can clearly see the Himalayan range there. Also, the food productivity was increased because during the lockdown, many people living in cities went back to villages and they start cultivating their land. There was the movement of urban agriculture in terms of rooftop gardens. There was a people also moving, coming back home from abroad, like many migrant workers working in India because of lockdown there, came back to Nepal, and then this labor force was observed in agriculture sector and cultivating the fallow land. So there was some sort of like a positive impact there. We can see that this impact for each of these target labels. So here, these all are under 69 target of SDGs. So I would not go in detail there, but those who are interested to know a bit more detail about this can look at the paper. I will share the link of the paper in a while. But in this paper, it's not only the score, it's also the interesting thing, it's also the narrative behind that. So as I mentioned here, this is for goal number 1, and this is for target 1, that means 1.1. Why different experts think that there will be a restricting effect with this score -2 in terms of like eradicating poverty for Nepal due to COVID, and why it subsides in the midterm, and what will happen in the long term. And we do have this narrative for each of these under 69 targets for this 3 time frame. So the report, or we put this as a supplementary information of our article, which is around 100 pages. So one can look at that article and try to go a bit more deeper there. However, it's a bit hard to give policymaker this 100-page target and, oh, you read it and you find the key messages. So that's not our objective. Yeah. So what we did is also like we try to boil down this information we got into like a 5 key points. We had a question in the morning, like what are the impeding factor to achieve SDGs here? And in terms of COVID, what we found here is like lockdown was one of the major issue in Nepal. I guess this is also the case in many other countries, because the modality of the lockdown is like we are putting all the people at home, but not doing more in a smart way so that things runs. So somewhat like the modality of lockdown in South Asia is in between China and in between Europe. So they try to implement things like in China, but due to this regulation, they can't do like in China. But it seems like in Nepal, we call it like we have a lot of this political protest and so on. It's similar to like Nepal Bandhan or Bandh. So whenever there is a Bandh, things are closed, but people are gathering inside. So, and then all those livelihood activities were somewhat like not happening. And what we see is like due to this lockdown as a measure, there is an issue of underemployment and unemployment. And during this initial phases, there was also closure of institutions like judicial institution and also other facilities. It has a problem. And since the government was focusing a lot in COVID related issue, there was also a fear from experts that this may have also diluted focus on non-COVID related issue in terms of SDGs. So that was also considered as a problem. And in countries in South Asia, including Nepal, are also let's say they are also dependent in some extent with our development partners from different donors. And there is also this anticipated risk that we may not get much support from the donor on non-COVID issue because all the countries are impacted due to COVID crisis. So this was considered as a key impacting factor. However, as a silver line, we also pinpoint that there is also some sort of like a transformation opportunity we obtained from this COVID-19. So first thing is like the lesson learned, like how we can do crisis management, how we can prioritize health, what's considered as one of the key opportunity we got from this pandemic. Experts are expecting that all countries also need this socio-economic recovery plan, and due to this movement towards low carbon economic green growth, there is an expectation or a hope that this recovery plan would be more like a green recovery plan, so that would be also a momentum towards the sustainable transformation. As we are talking today, like we were around more than 100 people in the morning, so we are talking from different part of the world or different part of the cities without physically traveling. So this is also one of this positive effect that is happening from this information from the COVID-19. So use of information and communication technology at different aspect of the life, from education to banking sector, was also considered as one of the transformation factor. I mentioned before, there was this reverse migration from one country to other countries, but also from rural area, cities to rural area, which was also considered as one of these transformative opportunity provided. And in Nepal, we have this new constitution, and our local government has a new authority, and this pandemic has also provided them to exercise that. And there was this hope saying that, okay, now local government is exercising their authority, and they can also do that also in future for obtaining SDGs. So this were more considering as this opportunities in terms of Nepal. So saying that, I would like to a bit touch also the issue of this SDG interactions that we are talking. Even though when we talk about like after pandemic, there will be recovery plan, there will be actions across different sector to boost the economy, to achieve the SDGs. And while doing that, what we need to understand is that there are also positive and negative interactions across SDGs. So in this big figure, what we can see is like whenever there is this bluish color, what we say is like the progress on one SDGs help to make progress on other SDGs. This is really a good news. However, there is also trade-off, like when you look at SDG 12 or also other SDGs, there are also a lot of trade-offs. That means progress made in one SDG may also hinder progress in other SDGs. So we need to tackle this. And there was also this question of how we can prioritize SDGs. So we can look at this network of synergies and trade-off. For example, here we can see that there are some goals and also targets which has like a lot of positive connection across whole SDG systems, and this positive connection can be leveraged to achieve all the SDGs. And the interesting thing here, we can see that this is target 12.3, or here SDG 12, also in some cases 15. So these are more like a SDGs which has negative connection towards whole SDG system. And in that context, the main message here is like continuation of business as usual is not an option. If you manage to achieve this target based on business as usual, it will hamper whole SDG system. So we have to think a bit on that direction too. So I do have few papers in this, so I can also share with you that one note would be the figure here is based on the global data set. This is not for Nepal, but we do have information for individual country on this scale. Saying that, I would like to summarize my talk with this 4 key points. One is pandemic has negatively impacted most SDGs, but it will be the impact will be lower on the course of time. The good news is there is also this sustainable transformation opportunity. However, the window for this sustainable transformation opportunity would be narrow, so we have to act quickly and use that opportunity. Yeah, and then to utilize this sort of opportunity, we need more research, more evidence, and maybe like the Earth Future Earth Forum, South Asia would be also one hub where we can do some sort of like research, more interactive, collaborative research to get this understanding. And as always, for every country, we need more evidence-based policy, not only policy based on opinion, but more on evidences. And I guess Future Earth would be also a forum there to do that. And saying that, I would like to thank you all. If you have some questions now or later, feel free to send me by email or Twitter. I'm engaged to interact with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Prajal. That was very informative, and it was very nice to have a component where you look in detail at the COVID-19 and its implication on the SDGs. So thank you very much for that. We will now be opening the floor for questions. We already have made note of a few questions left over from the previous session, as well as over the past couple of talks. But before that, since we have some speakers also here who've been paying attention to each other, I wanted to go ahead and allow any of the speakers, in case you have any questions for each other's talks, please go ahead and ask that. If not, I will proceed to the questions that we have from the audience. All right, so I'll just go ahead straight to the questions from the audience, since we have a couple of questions related to the pandemic and SDGs. So I'll go ahead and direct that to Dr. Prajal. There's one question that asks basically, how can the SDGs how can the SDGs be made for the least developed countries suffering from the pandemic? So how can the SDGs help least developed countries suffering from the pandemic? Would you have any answer to that question?
Yeah, so you know, things are two things are in a way related, but also yeah. So for example, I would pick point one example here. So during the pandemic, one of the lessons we got is like washing our hands. So we learn how to wash our hands. This doesn't hold only for less developed countries or low-income countries or middle-income countries. This also holds for Europe, because there was this poster also in the schools, in the kindergarten. Kids were taught how to wash their hands. And washing the hand is one of the crucial thing when you talk about SDG 3, which is about good health, but also this clean water and sanitation SDG 6 is also quite clean. It's also related to this washing hand, sanitation facilities, and so on. So we can see such linkages there. So, but tackling the pandemic itself has its own measures. I'm not an expert on that, so we have to go for health expert and use that measure what they are saying. But we can clearly see there are a lot of interlinkages there.
All right, thank you, Dr. Prajal. This is a question from before. I will direct it to Mr. Sundar. The question is, how do we get the private sector enticed to participate and finance justifying their returns with regards to the SDGs? I'm sure. Could you please elaborate any best practices?
Well, the best practice, I mean, let me talk a little bit about how to entice the private sector into implementing SDGs. See, one thing is that it is universally accepted by the members of the industry and business sector that being on the right side of the SDGs is good business proposition. Because one thing is that they can actually project their socially responsive and responsible image, and also it is good business because it will also help them improve their social capital as well as the economic capital. So that way it is all yes for them to adopt the SDGs as their integrate SDGs into their own strategies. Well, I mean, for instance, every business sector is now talking about low carbon pathways. For instance, the World Business Council has already adopted a kind of strategy internationally for a low carbon pathway, and all their members are actually vouching for that. So similarly, others are following suit. There are some good practices in the cement sector also. Some of the companies who have done very good work to actually showcase their effective pursuit of SDGs. There are people, I'm just forgetting the names of the companies who are working on photovoltaic cells and basically solar batteries, who have done very good work in terms of the carbon sequestration and things like that. So there are examples coming from across the sector. And the initiative which was taken by the Ministry of Commerce to actually revise the reporting framework to bring in sync with SDGs. They had the reporting framework, the business reporting framework, which is now completely revised, and the new one is completely, it's bringing in SDGs right, left, and center. And then that, and they are enthusiastically reporting on that framework. So that itself can be a kind of indication that business sector is gung-ho for SDG implementation. And I think both CII and FICCI, the business network organizations, they have brought out documents to showcase good practices. I have seen both the documents. Some of them having good case studies from different sectors. Please look at these documents and get hold of them and read through. And just one last point, when I was in Niti Aayog, we did a lot of national and regional consultation to develop awareness about SDGs. And in every consultation, we made it a point to bring in the private sector people to tell their story, to bring in their perspectives and all that. And they came and they brought in a lot of interesting perspectives in terms of what is the triple bottom line and how it actually interacts with the SDGs. So that was very interesting. So SDGs have affected the triple bottom line in a very big way. So I think there is a good future as far as business sector and SDGs are concerned. I was very skeptic to start with about the business sector's interest and intervention on SDGs, but there are positive indications. But not to put down your guard, like business sector is basically for profit. So there will always be a pressure, from inside to the financial aspect of the financial what do you call, outcome of their intervention rather than the sustainability outcome of that intervention. So there is a balancing there to be done, but there is a need to for the society to be very careful, watchful about the work of the business sector and hold them accountable for their good, the whatever they vouch by the triple bottom line or the whatever. So that's, I mean, we have to really walk a tightrope there to get the business sector kept enticed into working on the SDGs and producing good results.
Yes, thank you so much. I think what we'll do now is we've taken in all your suggestions and we would like to take this forward. Definitely, we have your comments, your thoughts on how the future Earth can be a platform to take this ahead. We're looking at 2025 for our on-ground pilot programs, and as many of the speakers said, that engagement with communities and also trying to see indicators which are not indicated in the SDGs are important for our community. We will try and see how we can mold a different way of viewing and assessing our progress to see how we stand in terms of SDGs and also the Paris Agreement. But we will take this forward, and I thank all the speakers, and also we look forward to 3 other speakers from Sri Lanka, Bhutan, and Mauritius.